Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Halftime Talk. We're honored to be joined this Wednesday by Mr. Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert, a spokesperson for the BJP ruling party on all energy matters. So Narendra, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Narendra, this is a big week in many ways for India because OPEC plus, the massive informal organization that is of the world's biggest oil producers, is meeting on Thursday. And of course, the last time they met, they set policy in which we saw oil supply reduced. Saudi Arabia famously cut 1 million barrels a day. And as a result, since then, we've seen oil prices climb rather sharply, now well above $60 a barrel on Brent. From India's perspective, what do you hope OPEC Plus decide to do when they meet on Thursday?
Well, very simply put, I mean, we just want the market fundamentals to be allowed to play their decisive role, because when you cut production, when OPEC, joins hands with Russia and with some other forces, and they cut production for no other reason but to push the prices up because they have their own agenda, or they might have their own needs, like Saudi Arabia wants $67 or Russia wants, whatever the figure. But that's not how the market should function. And that's not really being a good global economic citizen. I think it's important. Yes, we need oil. Economies like us, we are, oil-based economies, to be honest. But that does mean that, that OPEC and, other members, they should be coming together. They are a cartel, we all know that. But at the same time, they should not try to take advantage of, big consumers such as India at the time when we actually need OPEC, we need more oil, and we need more oil at affordable prices. I mean, we are not against they making some profit. It's business. We appreciate that, understand it. Some of them are heavily dependent on it. We know that as well. But at the same time, it's important that, that you keep in mind that if you really keep on pressing importers like India, especially democracies like India, then I think in the medium run and long run is going to go against you. I mean,
but you say the demand is there. OPEC plus Middle East countries had to cut oil supply quite dramatically last year to meet this unprecedented COVID pandemic, in which in April, most dramatically, 20 million barrels of demand disappeared literally overnight, and then through the year slowly recovered. I mean, is the demand there for OPEC to add more oil supply?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Indian demand is more or less back to normal. And in fact, if you look at the projections, going to go up on an annual basis, roughly 3%. And, from 5 million barrels before COVID, we are talking of 9 million barrels daily consumption in India within next 17 to 20 years. So organizations like OPEC and big producers like Saudi Arabia, and for that matter, even Russia, they need to take a long term. Yes, we understand demand destruction happened, due to COVID, but that was a temporary phase in the life of, nation and the life of economy. These things can happen. But at the same time, all these countries are making good profit, good money from economies like India. There was a time when we used to burn 50% of our hard currency reserves just on importing oil. Now we are a bigger economy. We're going to be even bigger. And OPEC and Saudi Arabia, they must keep in mind, actually, India is one country they will need in time to come. They will need India more than any other economy. So therefore, I think it's important to keep in mind that next door, you've got a market like India, 1.36 billion people, which is still very heavily dependent on oil and will continue to be very dependent on oil for a very, very long time to come. So I think it's important this understanding, a mature understanding established. In times like this, we need oil at a price which is affordable, and they should not be going for artificial measures just to push the prices up.
We have about 8 million barrels of idle supply that is being currently shut in. You said there in your earlier comments that the market should be allowed to work its way. Do you think everybody should essentially produce whatever they can?
Well, the point is that, if there are two things. First is price, and second is market share. I mean, if they start fighting between, let's say, Russia and Saudi Arabia and other countries and so on and so forth for market share, then they got to understand we are the market. We're talking of market is not on Mars or Jupiter. Market is right here. and we are among the most important market for them. So they must keep in mind when they talk of the market and market share, they have to keep in mind our, constraints and our sensitivities, because we don't want these countries to be, especially India, we want oil to be at a kind of price which is good for the oil producer. At the same time, we understand that oil should be at the rate, crude should be at a rate. They show that, these, especially the GCC countries, don't face any kind of social or political upheaval. Any kind of, social or political turmoil in these countries is not good for us, geopolitically speaking. So we understand that. But at the same time, I think strategy should be to strike the right balance in consultations also with big importers. What happened right now, they only consult the big producers, and they don't go for even informal, lengthy, dignified conversations with the big importers like India.
Well, what should we see the producer countries getting together, OPEC plus. What should the consuming countries do? If India wants to show muscle at this moment, should you create a consumer group to stand up, or would you consider that?
Well, muscle never solves any problem, and it's such an important commodity. Oil is a strategic commodity, very, very important commodity for us for long time to come. If India has to sustain 8% growth rate, which is our agenda, we need actually more oil, and we need good relations with oil exporting countries. So we are not in favor of any kind of, the play of muscle. What is important is understanding on the part of big oil producers, especially GCC countries and also Russia, that look, we got to work together. Because we understand, their medium-term, long-term agenda. If they have any concern, they should share, and so that we basically go for a price which is a win-win for both big exporters, also big consumers. Right now, what happened? They meet in secrecy. They go for dialogues in secrecy. Suddenly, the US also joins them. Like when President Trump was there, it looked like the President Trump and Kremlin and Saudi Arabia, they were all on the same page. And and the picture has now changed because President Biden is talking a different grammar. So now the point is that, it's important to have a long-term, medium to long-term understanding with big importers like India and China. I'm not talking forming any kind of a formal alliance, but what we need is a kind of platform where they also meet informally at least twice a year, and they look at the medium to long-term, the global scenario in such a way that there is more maturity on both sides.
Narendra, if there is pain at the retail level in a country like India, the government of India obviously has it in its power to reduce the taxation it charges. Massive taxation, about 60% of the retail price at the pump in India is going to the government of India, not to OPEC countries.
Well, you see, when you look at our tax structure, this is a very old tax structure, which is basically a carbon copy of the British tax structure. As you know, in Britain also taxes are very, very high. And so it's
all of Europe taxation is very high.
Exactly. So it's just copied from there. And, we plan to rework it and bring oil and diesel under GST. So that's under work. The constitution has been accordingly already amended. But as you know, India is a union of states, which means the taxes only about 40 to 45% taxes go to the federal government, 55% are going to various states in different forms. So it's not only the federal government, but various states are heavily dependent on these taxes. But this needs to be restructured. We need to go for tax rationalization. But that is an internal matter in many ways. At the same time, let's not forget that we are a densely populated country. We have signed the Paris Climate Change Protocol, and we are trying to, cut carbon emissions. So we don't want oil prices to be so low. When the prices went down to $20 or $10 per barrel, that was the time when we actually increased the tax in order to moderate the prices in such a way that India does not become even more polluted. And that we spend billions and trillions more just to basically end the deal with emissions. So it's a very tough and challenging situation for emerging economies like India. That's what I'm saying. Regular dialogues between big oil producers and big importers like India, so that we can work out a kind of picture, which is a win-win for both. As I said, we keep reading in newspaper, the Saudi Arabia needs minimum $67 per barrel in order to run the different kind of schemes they've got for their own people. But 67, but that cannot be the only basis. We can also go for similar numbers. We say oil must be at $30 per barrel so that we can take care of the welfare schemes we have got. That's not how the global economics or the economics of petroleum should work. If they push us too hard, we will have no option but to invest more in atomic energy and renewable, which we are doing anyway. But at the same time, I think it's important that it's economics and it's a political economy that is comfortable for them and also comfortable for economies.
Is the challenge right now, we're to just the beginning of March 2021, after an unprecedented COVID pandemic, which is still working itself through the global economy. Is it the problem that the oil price has recovered too quickly, or is it the actual level of oil? I mean, $60 on Brent doesn't seem excessive from a historical context.
No, you see, right now the problem is that prices have recovered rather suddenly. What happened that the government tax collection is historically low because the overall economic activities have suffered a lot the past 12 months. So government revenues are very low. So government needs more money. Now that's why one of the reasons is that taxes are high on petroleum products, or you can't afford to cut taxes at the time when prices have also gone up. So at this stage that India is passing through, the world is passing through, we ideally need oil max at $40 per barrel, at least for another 6 months. After that, Indian economy will be back to normal. By end of this year, we'll be actually going 10, we'll be clocking like 10% or 11% GDP. I mean, for us, these 3, 4, 5 months is the time which OPEC must keep in mind. And if OPEC can accommodate and we can work together so that our economy recover, if we recover fast within the next 7, 8 months, who will be the frontline beneficiary internationally? OPEC, oil producers.
I mean, $40 on Brent would be, nearly half of the budget requirement of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf producers from a fiscal point of view to balance their budgets.
I understand, fully understand. But let's also keep in mind that in Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi and all that, they've got sovereign funds. They've got some money spare. We don't have anything like that. We are basically, we live week to week, and we are much bigger, bigger country. Our political challenges are not less. These are democratic challenges, but political challenges are as intense, as serious, as deep as in Saudi Arabia. You see,
I mean, the recovery of oil price is obviously over the last number of months, but it's not alone. Every commodity has soared. I mean, copper is above $9,000. We've got agriculture commodities. All commodities have been rising, and in some ways, oil is a laggard behind some of the others.
Well, I mean, I see some merit in your argument, but at the same time, when you look at oil has always been a strategic commodity and a political commodity. So when more prices go up of oil, story is different. And let's not forget one thing: there is no cartel for other commodities that you mentioned. For oil, there's a cartel. Prices are going up because is being done artificially. I mean, if the market forces were taking the call, that is a different story. We know that. Prices happen over hotlines between, Moscow and Riyadh and other big oil producers. So that's what I said. If that was happening because there was more demand, then we understand. Or there were some of the market reasons. The reasons are absolutely out and out political. I mean, they want to secure themselves politically and economically. We understand and appreciate that. But how about, for instance, if they secure 50% and they let, for instance, economies like India to secure their interests, the other 50%, so that
we're going to see already a significant impact in due course from last year when investment in new supply was substantially cut back from international oil companies, maybe up to $100 billion of expenditure that wasn't put in place. So the outlook for supply tightness in 2023 could be quite severe. You could be facing much higher prices then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are very worried. I am personally very, very worried about, when I look at the landscape, coming landscape, let's say 23, 24, 25, very, very serious, because 23, 24 is going to be very important for us because we will have parliamentary elections in 24. And my own calculation is that by 23 and 24, or crude oil prices are going to probably be in the region of $100 per barrel. And that will be a very bad news for Indian economy, especially in the election year, which is 2024. So when you look at, yes, I fully agree with you. I mean, capex of E&P companies in the Middle East and different parts, even in India, got compromised. And we will all, the world economy, we big importers like us, consumers, will have to pay the price because they took the decision what they took. But the point here is that how do we right now, 3-4 months, it's because the pandemic is still there, pandemic is still hitting global economy. How can we come out of this as soon as possible? Because as I said, for countries like India, we need just 4 months, 4 months period where we can basically, come out of this turbulence, the
I
pandemic
mean, India
turbulence.
seems to be doing rather well in its recovery from the COVID pandemic. Infection rates are down. GDP growth is looking like on a fairly solid trajectory upwards. How do you see the rest of 2021, putting aside the oil price, obviously a big factor, but nonetheless, on the average, India economic recovery, Asia's economic recovery through 2021?
I think, by end of this year, Christmas time, I think we should probably be like back to about 7 to 7.8% GDP growth. And by March, since we follow April to March financial year, by end of the new financial year, that is March 2022, I think we will be in the region of 10 to 11% growth, which is fantastic news, which means we'll have more money. Demand for oil is going to go up by maybe by that time, maybe about 2%, if not full 3% as expected. But I think overall for India, this is very soon, this is all going to be behind us within the next 3 4 months. And China is more or less the same story. Vietnam, we are getting the same signs, and other economies also like Bangladesh is doing well. And we have heard similar stories from other economies as well. So I personally, my own sense is that this Indo-Pacific region, as we call it, including Australia, I think are going to be more or less back to normal probably by end of this year. We will already start noticing big changes by the fall. I think by September, life will be more or less back to normal.
What about the internal travel within India? Is that back to normal? Train, airplanes? What's the situation there?
Well, especially when you look at from the oil point of view, you see turbine fuel and others, aviation is now more or less back to normal, almost 80%. Wow. You see, so people are flying, yes, 80%. And India is one of the fastest growing aviation market in the world, as you know it. Trains, which mostly run on electricity, they are still taking time simply because the government is going very slowly, is linked with the vaccination campaign. So that as they see the progress in the vaccination, then the trains will be allowed, because trains often get crowded and they don't want trains to become the spreaders. So that's why there is a bit of regulation there. But otherwise, traffic jams are back, skies are full. I mean, the other day I came and I was just hovering over Delhi for 40 minutes because there was no place to land. So skies are already very crowded, and turbine fuel business is doing extremely well.
Let's just wrap up where we started, Narendra. OPEC Plus meeting on Thursday to decide on output policy for the second quarter. As we know, Saudi Arabia is currently keeping a unilateral cut of 1 million barrels a day off the market. What advice or would you urge or encourage OPEC Plus to consider when it meets on Thursday? Exactly what policy would you be looking for?
Two points quickly. First, just to share with you that India is in touch with Saudi Arabia and other major members of OPEC on this particular point. And the second thing is that, our advice is very simple, is that now time has come when OPEC should be basically taking decisions, all forward decisions, and working with their strategy in consultations with big importers. I mean, that time when they could really take a call as they wish.
Isn't that what the G20 was last year? I mean, as a platform, is that not happening now?
No, G20 is happening. As you know, the consultations are going on, and the British Prime Minister is thickly involved in this, and there are discussions going on. But we have also seen the G20 is more about the overall global governance, and all G20 members are not really affected by oil. While especially like India, when you look at the new large economy of the world, India is the only one which is most vulnerable. No other country of India's size, is importing as much as 86% of total requirement, 54% of total requirement of natural gas. So India is probably in a very, very, very difficult and very different position. That's why when it comes to us, when it comes to OPEC, we are probably the fastest growing market for oil and petroleum products. And for us, it's important that OPEC and India, that we go for more discussions. We understand their problems, we understand their constraints, we wish them well, but it's important they look at India with a similar eyes and with, if possible, with similar emotions.
They should be, as you suggest, be targeting a $40 price of Brent through the
40,
next
45,
quarter.
40,
40,
45,
forty-five.
not more than 45, not for another 3-4 months.
Well, Narendra, Taneja, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Narendra, the India's leading energy expert, the spokesperson for the BJP party on energy matters. Thank you for your time on Halftime Talk this week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.